Welcome back, everyone. Piers Morgan has flown across the Atlantic to have a discussion with Candace Owens, a political commentator and a YouTuber with over 3 million followers. It wasn't a debate, it wasn't a grilling of any sort. To me, it was a discussion between two friends over a cup of tea, with Candace giving Piers the opportunity to explain which side of the fence he sits on and what his views are with the current situation in Palestine. Let's take a look.
Go back to the start of the Israel and Palestine conflict in, say, 48. You can go back a lot further, but say you go back to 48. You could construct a very good argument for both sides.
I think the critique that people would have of you is they don't really know what you believe. Like, are you a chronic fence sitter? Do you actually believe anything? What do you actually think about Israel and Palestine? Removing your journalistic hat, which I know that you have been very even
on
that.
A human level, I'll tell you what I think. I think that October the 7th is one of the worst things I've ever seen. I think the retribution, as I call it, by Israel has now gone way beyond what is acceptable. I take issue with people that want to frame it as genocide purely from a technical point of view, that actually the definition of genocide would mean that, if Israel had killed 1 million people, I could accept the argument this is a bona fide genocide. It's more complex for me as a journalist when I look at this and compare it to other genocides, and I compare it to other wars, that if you take the central argument of Israel, which is put aside everything that happened before, if you take the October the 7th and the scale of it, with 250 people being kidnapped, including babies and Holocaust survivors, with 3,000 people coming over the border, attacking indiscriminately people, killing 1,200 and wounding nearly 7,000 more. If you take the scale of what happened, Hamas knew what Israel was going to do by way of response. Hamas indisputably have buried themselves into civilian areas quite deliberately for self-protective reasons. And Israel has been, I don't think they've been anything but indiscriminate, actually, in a lot of their attacks on these areas, particularly on the refugee camps. I think it's completely unconscionable, some of the stuff they've done there. And I think that it's gone on way too long and it has to stop. And I think I always ask people throughout the debates, what is a proportionate response? I didn't have the answer. I didn't know what is the correct proportionate response to the scale of October the 7th. And that's before you factor in the background and the history and what people see as the occupation of the Palestinians and the appalling plight of 2 million Palestinians in Gaza for so long. It doesn't factor in that. It's just, Hamas do this, what is the proportionate response that's acceptable? I think Israel's gone way beyond what is acceptable. However, I understand their argument that they are responding to, as they see it, a heinous terror attack, and they have vowed to get rid of the Hamas terrorists who did this, and that the only way to do that is to do it the way they're doing it. And I understand that that is their argument, and I understand that that to me is different to a country waging a wholesale genocide of a people.
I need to stop it there just for a second, I'm sorry. Piers' definition of a genocide is if Israel killed 1 million people. That's 50% of the Gaza population. Let's take that out of context just for a second. The population of America is 335 million. So if this was happening in America, you would consider it a genocide only if at least 150 million people were killed. Come on, Piers, where's your head at? If I have to be very critical, I would give a penny's worth of credit to Piers for stating that he disagrees with some of the actions from Israel, although many would agree and disagree with most of it, if not all of Israel's actions. Candace is normally quite a headstrong individual. However, I just feel like she's being too easy on Piers. It's not a calling him out on anything discussion, it's more of a how do you feel about it. Piers once again brings in what a proportionate response spanner into the discussion. Piers, you need to move on from this. It's getting very old and very tiring. Let's move on.
As we sit here now, this has to stop. The levelling of Gaza has gone completely out of control. I mean, a lot of Gaza is unoccupiable now. I think the aggressive expansion on the West Banks has been a form of terrorism, which is completely unacceptable. I think some of the language of some of the cabinet members has bordered on genocidal. And I think that there are clearly some members of that Netanyahu cabinet who actually would have no problem if all the Palestinians left Gaza right now. And so I'm not saying that there's not a potential for a form of genocide to be here. And we might look back at this in 2 years and you might say to me, well, we told you this is genocide, what they've done. They've got rid of all the Palestinians. That could happen. And I pray that doesn't happen. And I pray that, as I've always felt, the only way through this ultimately is fresh leadership on all sides, as we saw in Northern Ireland after many decades of horrific war between the IRA and the Loyalists, that ultimately they got to peace because leaders like Clinton and Blair and all these guys came together and they were just determined to get it. And they managed to get a peace now where people in Northern Ireland live in relative peace and safety, and they live amongst each other, people that used to be at war with each other. It would be amazing to think that could happen but I think we're a long way off that there now. So that's my honest human
I think that was honest.
view of it.
I have a good radar for honesty. I think you're being very honest, and I think it takes a lot, tremendous, for you to even say it, because it's so strange to me that we've gotten to a point where people are too fearful to say that what's happening has gone too far because they're scared of losing their jobs.
Yeah.
And this really shows, and I mean, I call it Likud party media in America. They have this sort of stranglehold on the media, and they sort of just will libel you and smear you and pretend that you're like a Nazi sympathizer, which
I would just start by saying the double standards and hypocrisy is ridiculous. Pierce on one hand states Netanyahu's cabinet intends to completely destroy Palestine and states he disagrees with the aggressive expansion on the West Bank, yet he doesn't think this is a genocide. What more do you need to see? Pierce also says the language used by some of the cabinet members is borderline genocidal. This is absolutely shocking. I mean, what's worse, the language used by these imbeciles or the flattening of an entire country? Clearly the latter is far more worse and only points towards one direction. We've seen the likes of Jonathan Conricus, a man who can't even string a sentence together, Flo Hassan, who wishes nothing but the destruction upon the Palestinian people, and Alan Dershowitz, a man linked directly with Jeffrey Epstein. How much more do we need to see, and how much more suffering does the Palestinian people need to go through before we put a stop to this madness? Candace Owens, I'm sorry, but I expected far more from you in this discussion with Piers. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.